So to start knitting, you need a pair of knitting needles and you need some yarn. These knitting needles are circular needles, but you can use them to do flat knitting. That's where you just knit backwards and forwards in rows. And you can also use them to do knitting in the round, where you just keep on going round and round the stitches. When you're knitting, you need to know which needles to use with your yarn. So this is Debbie Bliss Rialto Chunky, and it says to use 6.5mm knitting needles. So that's what I've got here. So we're going to start with the slip knot. You need to leave a little tail of yarn so that you can sew in neatly at the end, and then you make a loop with the yarn. The yarn that was on the top then gets taken underneath and across the middle of the loop. Then you hold on to that yarn crossing the middle, lift up, pull on both the other ends, and you get that knot. This is your slip knot. If you insert the needle through that and pull on the end that's leading to the ball of yarn, pull that gently and the knot goes to meet the needle, and there you have your very first stitch, the slip knot. So now I've got slip stitch on the needle and I'm going to cast on. There are a few different techniques for casting on. My favourite, and the one I use most of the time, is the cable cast on. To do that I need to put the needle through the stitch knitwise, which means going from the left to the right of the stitch and front to back. So we go in from left to right and from the front to the back. Be careful not to split the yarn. So here the stitch here is still one strand of yarn. You can, when you push the needle through, it can sort of split through the yarn and then you'll get an untidy stitch. So now, holding on to the yarn that's coming from the ball, I want to take that underneath the bottom needle, so going from right to left underneath and then back over the top. Back down, hold on to the underneath needle, the right hand needle again, and then pull that right hand needle backwards, and as you come round and over the top of the needle, you pick up the loop that you just created by going round the needle. The next stage is to pull the two needles apart, and then take the left hand needle through that loop. Once it's through the loop, you can take the right hand needle out, and you've made your second stitch on the needle. So the third stitch is formed slightly differently, but all the stitches after this are formed exactly the same. This time we want to go straight through behind this stitch. You can just go through that loop there. You can go through the loop and make another stitch just in exactly the same way as we made the second stitch, but that gives you a loopy cast on edge, which isn't very pretty to look at. So instead, to tighten up, firm up that edge, we go behind the entire stitch. So you can see here that it's just gone straight through behind the stitch, and the yarn has just pulled through slightly there. So let me do that. Let me do exactly the same thing. Take the yarn that's coming from the ball, go round underneath the bottom needle, back over the top, come back down to hold on, do the exact same movement, come back up, pick up that loop, pull the two needles apart, put the left hand needle through the loop. Once it's on, you can pull that slightly to firm up the tension for your loop. So now you've got 3 stitches on the needle. Now it's the same thing. From this time, we're always, while we're casting on, going to go through behind the stitch. Take the yarn round right to left, back over the top, pull the right hand needle back, pick up that loop we just created, take the needles apart, Bring the left hand needle behind and then front through that loop. Take the right hand needle out, pull gently on the yarn, and you've now got 4 stitches on your needle. So now I'm just going to carry on until I've got the number of stitches that I need on the needle. So now I've got 26 stitches on my needle, and I'm going to start knitting. There are 2 basic stitches with knitting. There's the knit stitch and the purl stitch, and I'm going to use the knit stitch today. So we need to insert the needle knitwise into the first stitch. So to do that, you take the needle, again just the same as with casting on, from the left to the right and the front to the back of the stitch. So this time it's through that loop. Make sure you're not going behind the stitch. Go through the loop. Make that bigger, you see, straight through that loop. And then again, keeping a little bit of tension on the yarn coming from the ball. Hold the yarn and take it round and underneath the bottom needle, back over the top and back down to hold the needle again, trying not to let go of the yarn. So then if we pull the right hand needle back, you can pick up that loop that you just created, but this time, instead of pulling the knitting away like you do when you're casting on, this time we move the stitch along to the end of the needle and just jump that underneath stitch off the end of the left hand needle. So now you've knitted your first stitch. It doesn't look much yet, I'll give you that. So onto the next stitch, again through that loop, left to right, front to back. Take the yarn underneath the needle, back over the top, come down to hold on. Pull the right hand needle back, slide it up, round and behind the stitch you've just knitting, and then push the needle along to jump the bottom stitch off the left hand needle. So again, go through the needle, left to right, front to back. The right hand, take the yarn underneath, back over the top of the needle, pull the needle back, pick up the loop that you just created, and then push the stitches along so just that stitch that you just worked goes off the end of the needle. So then you carry on like that for the entire row. So I've knit the entire row right to the end. I've got this last stitch to do, but it's exactly the same. Take the right hand needle from left to right, front to back, through that final stitch. Yarn goes under and back over. Hold on to the yarn again, pull back, pick up that loop you've just created, come up behind the stitch, take it right off the end, and then you've got nothing on the left hand needle. All your stitches are on the right hand needle, and all you do now is swap the left hand to the right hand, and you're ready to go again with a new row. So sometimes it can be a little bit confusing when you're starting out to work out where you need to put the needle for the first stitch on a new row. So you're looking at that and you think, oh, where does it go? Okay, is it through there? Is it through there? The way to tell is if you look down at the needle from the top, then you have to put your needle through a loop that goes over the top of the needle. So on my left hand needle, this is the loop going over the top for the first stitch. So I come down and I see that it has to be this loop and not this loop, because this loop isn't going over the top of the needle. So then again we go through left to right, front to back, just the same as before. With the first stitch it can tend to be a little bit loose, so quite a firm tug on that, and that will just keep the edge of your knitting that bit looser. sorry, that bit tighter, that bit neater. And we go round again.